Yeah, it turns out that we have some argument forms that, if we can recognize them as these argument forms, we don't have to go through the process of doing the truth table again. And so that's another way we're going to do test validity or not, is using these known argument forms. Yeah, and so this is in this section. There's a little table there. Six different forms. But it starts off with the valid argument form. So there's going to be four of these valid argument forms. It starts with what the book calls Modus Ponens. Yeah, that's the one it starts with. Modus Ponens. Don't guess it matters. We go in a different order. So that's just the name given to this type of argument. Sometimes it's also called the law of detachment. See that phrase? It's the same thing. Modus Ponens. A little Latin lingo there, I think. But this argument form is P arrow Q. P, therefore Q. Which you might recognize, that's the first one I did with the truth table. So we proved this one's valid. But it's also given a name. It's called Modus Ponens. This book calls it Modus Ponens. You'll see it. Other ways too. Well, there's three other ones. They also have listed there Modus Tollens, also called the law of contrapositive. And it's P arrow Q, not Q, therefore not P. Now we didn't look at that one as a truth table, but is that one valid? Yep. They've already shown it's valid, and they've given it a name. Okay. So that one's valid. That's another valid. We won't have to use a truth table on that. That's a valid argument form as well. All right, then we have, I think, what's next? The disjunctive syllogism. P or Q, not P, therefore Q. So that's a third type of argument form that's valid, called the disjunctive syllogism. Now, do you recognize that one? That's almost the one I did on the truth table one. However, on the one that I did the truth table for, I had P or Q, not Q, therefore P. That one's not listed under disjunctive syllogism, but logically it's the same. So disjunctive syllogism could be either this or this. Okay? Just be aware of that. Now, be careful with switching them. We can switch them there, but notice if I switch them over here, we'll notice that we can't do that over here. Okay, just so. And then the fourth one was the reasoning by transitivity. Sometimes you'll see a hypothetical syllogism. And basically, syllogism, we've seen that twice now here in these lists. Syllogism is just another word for an argument. Argument form. Anyway, it's P arrow Q, Q arrow R, conclusion P arrow R. We'll talk about more about that in just a second. All right, then we had two invalid forms. The first one is fallacy of, fallacy of the converse. And it's P arrow Q, Q, therefore P. All right, so there's the word fallacy. That's another word for invalid. So if you see that word, you know it's invalid. But that's what I was saying a while ago. I switched those P's and Q's out there, didn't I? Can I do it here for Modus Ponens? Nope. So if I switch P and Q out here, it's invalid. So you can't just always switch them out, P's and Q's. You gotta be careful. All right. And then the fallacy of the inverse is the last one. It's P arrow Q, not P, therefore not Q. That's also invalid. So we got 4 valid forms, 2 invalid forms. And again, notice that's flipped the P's, the not P and the not Q out here. So if you've got a not Q, conclusion not P, that way it's valid. If it's not P, not Q, that way it's fallacy, it's invalid. All right, so how are we going to use those? Here's how we're going to use those. Here's what I'd like for you to do. Write the argument in symbols. And then determine validity using the known forms. So this one's going to be a little easier because all we have to do is write in symbols and then match them up. And the other thing I mentioned while I'm thinking of it, I'll have these provided on the test. So you don't have to necessarily memorize these. I will provide these on the test, so somewhere or another. All right, so here's number 1. If the floor is dirty, then I mop it. Second premise. The floor is not dirty. Conclusion, I will not mop the floor. So what would that be in symbols? Well, it doesn't say which statements to label them, which letters, but let's just go with P's and Q's. How about it? You can use whatever letters you want because these are just arbitrary letters. We could use A's and B's if we wanted to. Well, let's just use P's and Q's. All right. So the floor is dirty. Let's call that P. I will mop it. I will mop the floor. We'll call that Q. So in symbols, that top statement is P arrow Q, isn't it? If P, then Q is P arrow Q. Yep. What's the second premise in symbols? The floor is not dirty. Well, the floor is dirty is P, so the floor is not dirty is not P, right? And then the conclusion, I will not mop the floor. Well, I call Q, I will mop the floor, or I'll mop it, so I will not mop the floor, that's not Q. Yes? That's what that would be in symbols? So now it's just matching. Using these known forms, is that valid or invalid?
Invalid.
Invalid, why?
Fallacy of inverse.
We got the fallacy of the inverse, don't we? It matches up with this one. Yes? So this one's invalid. It's a fallacy of the inverse. So the ones like this in the homework, that's what I want you to try to do. Given symbols, invalid, which form? Okay? All right. Number 2. If the floor is dirty, Then I will mop it. Okay, so if I mop the floor, then I get tired. Conclusion, if the floor is dirty, I get tired. If the floor is dirty, then I get tired. A little longer one. So what have I got? Same thing on the top one. The floor is dirty, then I will mop it, PROQ. What I have for second premise though. If I mop the floor, I get tired. What's mop the floor? That's Q. I get tired. That's different than the top two, isn't it? So I just have to use another letter, R. So R is I get tired. So the second one's Q, arrow, R. And then the conclusion, if the floor is dirty, I get tired. Well, the floor is dirty, that's P, arrow, I get tired. That's R, right? Is that one valid?
Yes.
Why? Well, it's a known argument form. Which form? Reasoning by transitivity, right? All right. Let's fairly straightforward. You know, most of these are fairly saying this is, I sometimes refer to that kind of chain rule for arguments, kind of chaining them together. This one's kind of the only one different because the others involve the if P then Q. This is P or Q, so those are usually pretty easy to recognize. But the only thing is, yeah, that if I have, let's do one more here. The floor is dirty or it is clean. The floor is not clean. Therefore, the floor is dirty. Yeah, so it's pretty recognizable there. You got P or Q, symbol-wise. The floor is not clean, so that's the opposite of the Q. It's not Q, and the floor is dirty, that's just the P. So, yeah, that what I mentioned before, I've got it still up here, but in the table itself, it usually just lists this. However, in this case, I've got this form of it, and in that case, it's the same. So this is that's still a disjunctive syllogism, it's valid. So, anyway, be aware of that as you go through.